Revenge films.
I had a fiancé named Thomas. We had already been dating for about 2 years, and we had discussed getting married too. But I knew that I was honestly disliked by his mother. When we went to go greet her to tell her that we're getting married, "A girl like you isn't a good match for my son. I won't allow you to get married to him." That's what I was told, so I decided to go again to somehow get her permission. But she took the treats that I carefully picked for her and threw them in the garbage in front of my eyes. At the time, I really couldn't understand why his mother would hate me so much. But after we ended up basically forcing our marriage, I found out the reason soon after. It turns out that he had a childhood friend, and that girl was a big investor, and both of the mothers were good friends as well. Besides the fact that the two mothers got along, more importantly, she was the daughter of a wealthy investor, and his mom wanted him to marry her more than anyone else. However, he married me instead, so after we got married, my mother-in-law became even more terrible towards me. I was already working full-time, and I was planning on working full-time even after I got married until we had children. Even though I was working full-time, she would suddenly call me on my days off and tell me to go organize her storage room or clean out her closet, and she would use me left and right. That was my life. And by the time 1 year had passed, my mother-in-law had already done every single classic case of harassment towards me. And then on top of that, my husband cheated on me with none other than the daughter of the investor. It turns out that the mother-in-law had lit the fire with the daughter, and they would leave me out and go to dinner with just her and the three of them, or find some kind of excuse to make the two of them go shopping together and force them to go on dates. As things like that continued, the investor's daughter made a move on my husband, and they started dating in secret behind my back. Of course, he was still married to me, so this definitely counted as an affair. Then one day, my mother-in-law called me out to meet her. "I'm sure you know this already, but my son doesn't have feelings for you anymore. That's because he and Melissa are in love. So if you want to divorce him, of course I won't ask you to do it for free." Then she presented me with her bank book and seal. "What is this?" "There is $40,000 in here. You could take that with you. So I want you to break up with my son." "What are you saying?" I received the bank book from my mother-in-law, grinning from ear to ear. She must have assumed that I would try to fight back, and she sat there with her mouth wide open. But I gripped the bank book and seal in my hand and gladly replied, "Then I'll get a divorce!" And I walked out of the room. Then I handed my husband and signed the divorce papers and told him, "Let's get a divorce." Then my husband, just as his mother had said, was so focused on Melissa that he quickly signed the divorce papers and was finalized just like that. My former mother-in-law seemed perplexed as to why I was so quick to agree to the divorce, but there was a reason behind that. Actually, about 1 year after we got married, I discovered that my husband was in debt, and that amount was an unbelievable $80,000. I was shocked, and when I asked my husband what he used on it, he said he spent it all on gambling at racehorses. Of course, I was shocked to find out about the debt after we got married, but I was even more shocked that it was such a large amount of $80,000. When we were still engaged, we didn't know the details of each other's financial situation, and since we weren't living together, I didn't know that he was in debt either. Also, he didn't tell his mother, but we also found out that my ex-husband was physically unable to have children. I wanted to have children as soon as we got married, but no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't get pregnant. Just in case, I went to get tested, but there were no problems on my end. That's why my ex-husband got tested, and we found out about his infertility. I had thought that I would be able to have children when I got married, so to be honest, I was pretty devastated about my husband's results, but his attitude instead was,
"I don't really like kids that much anyway. And well, if they say I can't have kids, then there's nothing we can do about it."
That was his response, and I was stunned. It's true that it wasn't his fault nor his responsibility to have children. However, I wanted to give birth to a child with the person that I love. That's why I was really lost as to what to do about it. And that was when Thomas cheated on me. The catalyst may have been his mother, but an affair is an affair. On top of that, we had a dream of building our own home. But with a debt of $80,000, we wouldn't be able to save up the initial down payment. We couldn't have kids, and he was cheating on me. That's why I thought it would be much better to get the money and break up with him. After that, just as his mother had hoped, my ex-husband and Melissa got remarried shortly after the divorce. However, about 6 months later, I heard through the grapevine that Melissa's parents and Thomas's parents had gotten into a huge fight. As it turns out, they discovered his debt and the fact that he wouldn't be able to have children, especially since Melissa's family was a family of investors. They needed a grandchild to be the next heir in the line. However, with Thomas's body, they wouldn't be able to have even one grandchild, and I can understand why that would be a huge problem. On top of that, for their son-in-law to be riddled in debt from gambling at the horse races, that was such a bad look and incredibly embarrassing for their name. Melissa herself was apparently furious, not only about the debt, but that he was hiding the fact that he couldn't have children. Just like me, it is normal to want to have children with the person that you love after you get married. And yet, even though he had gotten tested and knew the results, he didn't say anything to her, so of course she would get upset. Well, to be honest, I saw all of this coming to begin with. Hee. For the record, I also sued Melissa for the settlement fee for the affair. Her parents were terrified of this getting out to the public, so they paid it to me in full at the speed of lightning. After all of that, the conversation had somehow flowed back to me, and one day my mother-in-law appeared to catch me on the way back home from work. You knew about my son's debt, and that he can't have children, didn't you? She yelled at me, almost in a tantrum. What? Oh, yes, I did know, but what about it? What do you mean, what about it? Why didn't you say something like this sooner? I can't say something that private when it's his life. Plus, I knew about Thomas's affair. That's why I divorced him. There's no need for me to expose personal information about him, is there? Don't make up excuses. Thanks to you, do you have any idea what's happening to us now? You wasted my son's life twice now. About those words, I don't believe it's my fault that your son's life was destroyed, is it? Aren't you the one that pushed him towards having an affair in order to get him to be married to the daughter of an investor for your own interests? Ugh, shut up! This is all your fault! I'm going to say this many times, but this is not my fault. This is all you and your son's fault. Not only is it unbelievable that somebody who already has a family would spend so much money gambling on horse races, but you also lured the daughter of an investor for your own sake. That's why this happened, isn't it? You did this to yourself. I am going to destroy you! My former mother-in-law raised her voice so loud that everyone around us could hear, and then she tried to lunge towards me that somebody who was watching us called the police and she was arrested. After that, it came to light that Melissa had actually made a move on Thomas because she was tricked into doing so by his mother, and they sued her for a very high settlement fee, and now, apparently she is also riddled in debt. As for my ex-husband, he became known as the guy who had an affair soon after getting married and got a divorce, and everybody around town knew him as the guy with a lot of problems. About 2 years after my divorce from him, I got to know a man who was a little younger than me, and I got remarried. When I told my new husband, honestly, that I wanted children straight away, he happily got on board, and we began to really try for kids. Within 6 months, we found out that we were pregnant, and soon after, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. After I gave birth, my husband was promoted and transferred, and we decided to go as a family, so we moved out of my hometown. About 7 years later, we went back to visit the town for the first time in a long time. Through the window of the convenience store, I caught a glimpse of my mother-in-law and my ex-husband, who both looked 100 times older than they did before. There wasn't even a shadow of the woman who used to bully me or yell at me back then. According to what I heard from an acquaintance, after all those incidences, Thomas was known as a problematic guy and he couldn't find anyone who wanted to date him, much less marry him. In the end, he is still living alone with his mother. As for his mother, she still hadn't been able to pay back her debt from the time. And when the rumors spread about her fooling the investor's daughter, the neighbors all became cold towards her, and now she spends most of her time hiding at home alone. To be honest, even without my former mother-in-law's help, my ex-husband and I's life may have resulted in divorce anyway. However, that doesn't mean that it was okay for it to be destroyed by someone else's hand like that. Creating such a selfish debt is one thing, but to mess around with somebody else's life like that is surely going to result in some punishment from karma.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.